Welcome to Sabres Scoop, presented by the Hockey Writers, a once a week show covering all things Buffalo Sabres and NHL hockey. We thank you for joining us today, and to make sure you don't miss any future episodes, make sure you subscribe to us and like the show on YouTube. Follow and share us on Facebook and catch all the other great content on thehockeywriters.com. And on our Twitter feed, you can find us at Sabres Scoop THW and everything else at the Hockey Writer. Jordan, there's an announcement to make. Not one I was hoping that we had to make, so soon after our last big announcement, but an announcement nonetheless. So take it away.
Yeah, after a brief stint with THW Sabres Scoop, we are sad to announce that Nick Richardson is leaving us after this week's episode. We wish Nick the best as he's embarks on a full-time job, but for the future of the show, that means it's just going to be Brandon and I, and the goal is to get a guest on each week that we can talk to. Preferably, maybe it's somebody from the Hockey Writers, maybe it's somebody else, and we can cover everything, the East Division and the Sabres. But more importantly, we just want to wish Nick a very happy future here. He's really great in the 4 episodes he lasted. And any final words, Nick, as before we get into the Sabres news and updates?
Yeah, like you said, I wish it could have been for a little longer than 4 episodes, but that's just how things go. But it was real fun to be part of the Hockey Writers team. I'm sure you guys will handle it admirably from here on out, and can't wait to see what you guys do in the future. I'll definitely be following along. So yeah, well, let's get into the news. We had a retirement this today, and it was a very Buffalo Sabres related retirement. Goaltender Ryan Miller, at the end of the season, announces he will be retiring from the NHL at 40 years old, still with the Anaheim Ducks, but obviously made his name with the Buffalo Sabres. Retires as the all-time winningest goalie from the United States, 390 career wins. Most of those, 284, came with the Sabres. Obviously had so many great moments as a Buffalo Sabre, including that historic 2009-2010 season when he won the Vezina Trophy and almost won United States a gold medal at the Winter Olympics. So we'll get into all of Ryan Miller. And just for me personally, growing up on Dominic Hasek, it was kind of we were kind of spoiled watching Ryan Miller come back, and he basically had 20 years of uninterrupted great Buffalo Sabres goaltending. So Brandon, I'll throw it to you first. Just first impressions, thoughts on Ryan Miller announcing his retirement.
Yeah, so I wasn't naturalized as a Sabres fan, I guess you could say. I grew up fans of different teams, but I've lived in Buffalo for some time now, and from all my friends, everything I understand is that Ryan Miller was a total rock star when he was in Buffalo. He meant so much to so many hockey fans here, and like you said, in 2010, there was not a goalie better than him on the planet, by all means, and so at one point he was the best in the world, and he's definitely going to go down as right next to Hasek in the Sabres greats. So it's awesome to see him have such a great career. Never got that Stanley Cup, but I have a feeling that one day his number will be hanging from the rafters, and that's why goalies haven't worn 30 since him. So pretty special player right there. Jordan, anything to add?
Yeah, I tend to agree with both your guys' opinions. Like Dominic Hasek was so good, but he was here for a shorter time. Ryan Miller really just carried some bad teams, and he made them amazing just with the level of his play. And moving on to our next topic here, Sam Reinhart is currently playing lights out for the team today and is adapting very well into the center ice position, as we're seeing. This guy's scoring at a nearly 40 goal pace. He's got 23 goals in 49 games. I'm going to kick it to you, Nick. What have you thought about Reinhardt's play this season? He's really looking good, eh?
Yeah, he's been impressive. In my most recent story, I focused on the Sabres who improved their stock the most, and the first guy that came to mind was Sam Reinhart. And I think what's been so impressive about his performance this year is that he's done so much of it without Jack Eichel. Eichel obviously been out for the majority of the season, and Reinhart, his production, it hasn't gone down at all. I believe this is his 4th straight 20-goal season, even in these abbreviated seasons. He's a guy more and more with the emergence of Leon Draisaitl, that 2014 draft, it's kind of become a what if the Sabres had taken Draisaitl over Reinhart. And Reinhart obviously isn't a guy who's in the Hart Trophy conversation, but he's a guy who's established himself as a legitimate first line forward. And his contract has been a point of discussion and whether or not he has a long-term future. But I think a guy we just touched on it, playing at almost a 40-goal pace this season, can't let that guy go. And I think it'll be interesting next year with a healthy Jack Eichel. If you put him Eichel and Jeff Skinner on a line, you figure one of these days Jeff Skinner's going to start scoring again. That could be a very exciting first line for the Sabres. So, Brandon, your thoughts on Reinhart, who's been, I think, far and away the Sabres' best player this year?
Yeah, Skinner, Eichel, Reinhart. That's the line that was one of the best in hockey just a few years ago. It's where Skinner scored 40. Reinhart was a good contributor, and Eichel had a career high in points, point per game. But yeah, as far as Reinhart goes, 23 goals on this team in this season. That's something that shouldn't be happening. And the fact that it is really impressive. Reinhart has totally, like you said, improved his stock this season. He's in a position right now where he has all the leverage to ask for money in term if he wants it from this team. He is a restricted free agent, so the Sabres have, they have some leverage as well. But the pace that he's playing at, like that clip, a 40-goal clip in a shortened season, like especially with Jack Eichel out, and he's been doing this basically driving his own line. It really shows that he deserved to be picked where he was in the draft, even though guys like Draisaitl were picked after him. So I hope he gets a big contract. He deserves it. I hope it's with the Sabres, and hopefully they can make something work. The Sabres also have some more younger talent coming up. We have a couple players we're going to highlight actually. But let's stick to the top of goalies. We talked about one of the past Sabres greats in Ryan Miller. A lot of people are thinking this young up-and-comer, UPL as they call him, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, is going to be the next Ryan Miller, Dominic Hasek type goalie in the Sabres crease. He's had an impressive start to his career. I really do think so. He won his NHL. Did he win or did he lose?
Oh, he won.
He won.
He
Okay, it was a
win, yeah.
high-scoring game. He made 36 saves on 40 shots. Won his NHL debut against the Boston Bruins, and he has played pretty well. Faced a large quantity of shots in each of the games. He's started tonight as we speak, and that game's wrapping up as we speak as well. But any thoughts on UPL and our first impressions of him? Let's go to Jordan first.
Yeah, I mean, when we talked about UPL earlier, we were just worried he was going to allow like 7-8 goals and get completely, screwed over basically. But he's really looked great. I mean, to face 40 shots in your NHL debut, and you're facing the Boston Bruins here, who just acquired Taylor Hall. They're one of the premier teams in the National Hockey League, and he's faced 40 shots basically every game. I believe he even was on pace to face 40 shots tonight, and he probably did. So in your first 3 games to be facing the quantity of shots that he's facing, and these are coming from quality players shooting the puck as well, it's pretty impressive. And I think he is showcasing that he does have an NHL future.
Yeah, I think so. He's look back, he's a second round pick, and the Sabres traditionally have not taken goalies very high in the draft. So that comes with a lot of expectation. And it's taken him a little while to get there. We've kind of touched on, he's had some struggles in the American Hockey League, but goaltending is a weird position. You can see a guy who struggles in the AHL and then is lights out at the NHL level. And I think right now it's a little hard to kind of get a good read on him, especially considering the Sabres are fielding a team with so many young players, especially on the blue line. I think it's, you kind of have to treat this as a definite learning curve period. And that's probably going to be the case next year if he ends up being a regular contributor in the crease. But yeah, I would say so far he has not looked out of place for a young guy making his NHL debut. Another guy who recently made his debut, defenseman Matthias Samuelson, and he too has not looked out of place for the Sabres. He's gotten into some games, has played in 6 so far, and already has 2 assists after putting up 11 points in 19 games in the AHL for Rochester. Been playing on a line pair, I should say, mainly with Rasmus Ristolainen. And again, those 2 big guys, they are an imposing presence on the blue line, and Samuelson is a piece they obviously hope is going to be a part of this blue line moving forward. So Jordan, I'll throw it to you. What do we think about Samuelson in his first cup of coffee in the NHL?
Well, I actually did write an article on this today talking about his play so far this season, and it is promising. You're looking at a guy that many scouts believe should have been a mid-first round pick back in the 2018 draft, and he did fall to 32 overall to Buffalo. And he's looked pretty good, in all levels. The underlying stats in the AHL tend to suggest like a shots share rate that maybe he still needs improvement there. But the tangible skills, like he really does have a lethal shot. And I do find it curious because Seth Apert, who was actually his head coach in the national team development program, the Sabres brought him in as the head coach of Rochester. So there is an actual connection there. And back in 2018, Apert actually said that he believes Samuelsson could be a top 3 defender for any team in the National Hockey League. So clearly this organization is kind of touting Samuelsson as a guy that will be a top 4 guy for them. And you got to develop him properly. You know, that's what the Sabres have been known for, doing poorly as of late, you know, in the past decade, I would say. And Samuelsson, I do think if you just develop him well, I do think he should play some AHL games next year still. It's going to look really, really good at some point.
Yeah, for sure. It's totally great to hear you know, the Amerks head coach say that about Samuelsson, that he thinks he can play at a high level on any team in the league, you know, top 3, like you said. That's great to hear. And hopefully he turns into something like that. He's looked pretty good. Like you said, he has 2 assists already in 6 games. I think playing on a pair with Ristolainen, as much as a lot of people want to shoot down the idea about, you know, anything to do with Ristolainen is not good. I think he really is at this point a great mentor for the amount of time that he's been in the league and the way that he plays the game. I think he can really be a good mentor for these young players, like, you know, like Jacob Bryce and like Samuelsson. So that's great. Like you said, I think he will see some AHL next year as well, but he's carving out a space for himself on this roster, and that's what you want to see. And to be only drafted, you know, 3 years ago and in the second round, that's a pretty quick turnaround to develop that kind of prospect, and hopefully he can turn into a good player.
Yeah, totally. And with that, let's reset the show. So you're watching Sabres Scoop, presented by the Hockey Writers. Make sure to subscribe to and like the show on YouTube, follow and share us on Facebook, and catch the great hockey content on thehockeywriters.com and on our Twitter feed. And then Nick, it is time to recap, surprise, surprise, another Sabres Bruins games. It feels like it's never ending lately. What happened tonight?
Yeah, they've played the Bruins a lot, and they've lost to the Bruins a lot recently. And it's another loss to Boston. The Sabres fall 5-2. Sabres were able to tie it in the third period at 2-2, but a late flurry by Boston, including a goal by old friend Taylor Hall. There's another big surprise as the Sabres fall. And Sabres are going to, you know, once again, another tough year against the Bruins. We mentioned Sam Reinhart earlier, scored again tonight, and Casey Mittelstadt, another guy who's been playing well, scored again tonight. So that's a good sign. But, you know, at this point, the Sabres just playing out the stretch. I think at this point, just trying to get through to the end of the season. You know, we know they're playing hard, but with only a handful of games left, you know, there can only be so much motivation you can drum up. So, Brandon, any thoughts on another loss to the Bruins tonight?
Yeah, you know, I'm not going to beat up the roster too much just because the Bruins have been such a good team of late. You know, they started a little, you know, a little for them by their standards, but you know, of late they really, I'd say in the past month, they've really been one of the best teams in the NHL. So to lose like this to them, it's not so bad, especially because we're, you know, where the Sabres are. But you know, rallying back, tying it up after what UPL let up the first shot again. So you know, they're already clawing their way from behind right from the get-go. But, you know, like you said, you know, Mittelstadt puts one in. You know, Reinhart scores again to stay hot. He was the most hot player, by the way. So if he wants 25% off Mo's tomorrow, go show them that code. But yeah, you know, it was a good effort. That's, you know, pretty par for the course at this point, though. 5-2 loss. You know, they've had so many of those this season, that specific score too. Jordan, anything you want to add from this game?
Just want to say my boy R2 Rutsalainen did get an assist in this game. That's actually his first NHL assist, I believe, because he has 4 goals in 11 games. So I wasn't able to get the thing I said I was going to get last week with his name on the back. I'm just teasing it at the moment. I think next week I will have that. And yeah, I mean, the Casey Mittelstadt redemption arc continues. I believe he has now 10 goals on the season. So it's been a pretty impressive season for some of these guys. And it's nice just to see guys like Samuelsson work their way onto the roster, you know, with certain guys out. You know, obviously the Jack Eichel injury changed the course for this franchise. I'm not expecting them to beat a Boston Bruins team that's looking very hot going into playoffs, but, you know, it's just nice to see some guys play some games down the stretch here.
Yeah. Oh, and yeah, can't praise Casey Mittelstadt enough for his turnaround this season. He has really been impressive. Hopefully, he has a bigger role next season as well, and starts to keep that up. But we're going to transition into some NHL news. As you know, for a last place team, there's only so much you could talk about in the last few games of the season, but there's no shortage of league-wide news, and there's a lot to talk about. First, we're going to talk Andrew Shaw, who announced his retirement. This caught me by surprise that he was only 29 years old. I feel like Andrew Shaw has been around forever. He was on the Chicago Blackhawks Cup teams, you know, that's why. But at the age of 29, he retires to what he attributes being because of concussions. So, traumatic brain injuries, something you can't take too seriously at that age, especially when you're, going to start thinking about settling down and having a family, and consider your career earnings and what do you value more. And he said, I got to step away. So the question I pose to you guys, are we going to see more players take Andrew Shaw's route and start to consider retiring at an earlier age? And should we see that? Let's go to you, Nick.
Yeah, I do think that'll be a little more par for the course as we move forward. Andrew Shaw, seen as one of the tough guys, maybe not a guy you would consider an enforcer, but a pest, as they like to say. But a guy who's going to more often than not be throwing the body around. And yeah, I do think those guys, don't always have the longest careers to begin with, but I think it could definitely be more common to see some of these guys retire a little early. You mentioned Shaw seeming like he was around forever. I was sure he was on all three Blackhawks Cup teams. Turns out he was only on the last two, but that's again just a testament to how much of a fixture he was, kind of one of the heroes. And I think he's going to be a guy with a good reputation moving forward. Just kind of looking at his career stats, only 120 goal season, but a key cog on two Stanley Cup teams. And I think he's going to go down as one of those kind of the definition of a glue guy that you need to win a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, totally. I mean, when you look at a guy like Andrew Shaw, I attribute it kind of like similarly to Joey Heishan, who obviously had a very shorter career. I don't know if you guys remember him, a first-round pick back in 2010 at Colorado. He basically had his whole career ending injury in the Memorial Cup when he faced a hit by Braden McNabb, who's gone on to have a successful career today. I wonder if he's actually talked to Andrew Shaw about this, because the concussions are no joke, man. And we've seen with recent studies that, an average a prime of a hockey player nowadays is from 20, like it's 21 really to 25, 26, like most people used to think you could be in your prime into your 30s. That's simply not the case anymore. You're on the decline once you're 29 years old. And if you've already faced, traumatic, severe brain injuries, you do have to start considering, is it worth it? And, Andrew Shaw, I do think made probably the correct decision here, because I'm assuming he took some medical advice and all of that stuff. So, I just want to wish Andrew Shaw the best here, the best retirement he can have at least. Yeah. And yeah, totally. And with that, guys, some happier news. Turner Sports signs on as the secondary broadcaster in the US TV deal for $225 million per year. There will now be likely an NHL on TNT show. If you guys are unfamiliar with that type of concept, the NBA does one right now. And that's kind of led into some discussion lately on who the panelists could be heading into next season. We've actually thrown up some names here, so let's just talk about it, guys. What panel do we want to see assembled on a potential NHL on TNT show? Let's start with you, Brandon.
Yeah, well, let me start by saying I think that's huge to have a daytime talk show. When you look at the big, sports, you look at the NFL has, Good Morning Football and whatnot, and NBA has NBA on TNT, but now NHL on TNT with a panel of people that, fans are going to get to know and get to see, non-hockey fans. It's going to be awesome. As far as who I want is not going to end up being on the panel. Who do I think they're going to get? I think they're going to go for people like Barry Melrose, who has been around the game for a long time, currently with ESPN. He wears those, big suits, way too big for him. That's what he's famous for. But, that's a guy who's been around the game. So maybe he'd be able to add some old timer insight. I don't know. Somebody I personally would love to see, Kevin Weeks. Okay, Weeksy has been on NHL Network for a long time. I'm going to say again, like forever. And he's somebody who actually has some intangibles. He has a personality. He's played the game, and he has a lot of connections in the game, and he already does it. So I think Kevin Weeks would be my vote to be on the panel. Throw Melrose in there as well. You guys got any others? Maybe Nick?
Yeah, I think you made a good point about the personality, and that's kind of the issue with a hockey show like this. Is hockey players by nature don't seem to have much personality, at least when they're doing interviews or anything like that. But no, I think Kevin Weeks would be a spectacular choice. Melrose is obviously a guy a lot of hockey fans in America are familiar with. One guy that came up in our discussion was Bob McKenzie, Bobby Margarita. Would he consider coming out of retirement? Obviously, he's much more of a staple north of the border. but I think he would lend a tremendous amount of credibility to this new show. And hey, we know Charles Barkley has kind of made a name for himself on the NBA show, and maybe not as a regular contributor, but maybe as the guest guy coming in once in a while to liven up some of these discussions. I think Charles will have to touch up on his NHL history a little bit, but that would definitely make for some amusing anecdotes. Jordan, any other thoughts on some people you might want to see?
So yeah, a name I'm curious about that they might try scooping up from Hockey Night in Canada is Kevin Bieksa. Like he's really shown to be like such a funny guy on the headlines panel. He's done everything right there, and it's going to be tough to pry him away. But I mean, they clearly are spending the money here. Why not get a guy like Kevin Bieksa? Another name, I think PK Subban's destined to be on the show once he retires. That's a guy that has always shown the flash, and I think he would be fun to watch on a show like that. And it's quite clear they want to make this fun. So like, get Shaq on, get him to talk about hockey. See, I mean, I don't know if you guys saw, but he couldn't even name 3 teams. He thought the LA Kings were the California Kings.
Oh, come on, Shaq. I didn't see that, but that's disappointing. You got to know LA at least.
I know, and totally. But I mean, this is so huge for the NHL, making over $600 million per season. They're going to have an established show like this. It's quite clear that, even though there were, reports out there that there was going to be a flat cap for the next 4 years, I think that's going to be accelerated here, guys. Like the NHL starting to bring in more money. They're starting to get fans back in the stands. There's brighter days ahead here for the National Hockey League.
Yeah, absolutely. And so last week we touched on the playoff races and who we thought would finish in those spots, and those races are starting to become more clear. So the discussion we're going to have this week is some of the postseason award candidates, and it's always an interesting discussion. Take a look at those. This year, in a shortened season, some of these awards seemingly have been decided for a while now. So we'll run through a couple of the major ones, and obviously have to start with the Hart Trophy for league MVP. And this one feels like it's been wrapped up for half the season. Connor McDavid is absolutely running away with this award, may very well score 100 points in a 56-game season. And I guess the question is not whether Connor McDavid is going to win the Hart Trophy, but is it going to be a unanimous vote? And do we think he can get to 100 points? He needs to basically score at a 2-point-a-game pace over these last few games. But if anyone's capable of it, it sure is him. Brandon, thoughts on McDavid running away with the Hart, and your thoughts if he can get to 100 points?
Yeah, I saw something today that was like he has about a 28% chance of getting to 100 points, which means you just know he's going to get to 100 points. I if he does that, that is truly incredible. I think he can definitely break 90. 100 is going to be a bit more of a challenge, but come on, like if he stopped scoring right now, it would still be a amazing scoring pace. So if he can get to 90 for me, it seals the deal. I mean, the next highest scorer is Draisaitl, and he plays on the same team. So we're gonna go McDavid, and that's the only choice for me. Jordan, I hope you agree with me.
Of course, I do. I think it's going to be Connor McDavid clearly at number 1. He has to get 16 points in his last 9 games. And if you guys haven't been keeping track, he's got, I believe, 3 points in each of his last 4 games. Like this guy's just superhuman. I think Austin Matthews is pretty clearly the number 2 guy in that Hart Trophy discussion. And I would say probably Patrick Kane should be. I mean, some would argue for Nathan McKinnon, but I think what Patrick Kane's doing in Chicago without Jonathan Toews the whole year is quite clearly the number 3. But McDavid's in a league of his own, man.
Yep. No, I think those are all good choices. And I think another guy was, we get to our next word, who might in another year might get some Vezina Trophy consideration, is Andrei Vasilevsky, the Lightning goaltender. He also, like Connor McDavid, is kind of seemingly locked up this award. You can look at pretty much any kind of goaltending statistic you want, and chances are Vasilevsky is going to be near the top. And a couple other guys have been hovering around this discussion, but I think the Lightning goaltender, even on such a star-studded team, has really stood out and is, I think, one of the main reasons why Tampa Bay could be a threat to win it all again. So we can talk about Vasilevsky. Brandon, anyone else that could even conceivably come to mind in the Vezina discussion?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it, and I don't think anybody in the league this year has had as big an impact on their team and kept them near the afloat near the top of the standings as much as Vasilevsky. Look at the other teams that are top in the league, like the Carolinas, like the Torontos, teams like that. They've all done it by committee. Florida Panthers, they've had two, pretty much 1A, 1B all year. And so I wouldn't call one of those goalies a Vezina runaway. So at this point, it's got to be Vasilevsky. Maybe throw Connor Hellebuck's name in there, but he just won it last season. So I don't know if the NHL likes to do the back-to-backs. But yeah, so it might be Vasilevsky for me. I'm trying to think who else. Marc-Andre Fleury has been super, super impressive for me. So I might throw him in as a dark horse candidate just to see if he can squeak in there, but I'm not positive. But he's an interesting one too. Jordan?
You know what? Marc-Andre Fleury is going to be my choice, actually, because Vasilevsky and Fleury currently both have a 927 save percentage, guys.
There we go.
And, for the most part, Robin Lehner hasn't played that many games this season for the Vegas Golden Knights. So I think Marc-Andre Fleury is doing a lot more here for this Vegas Golden Knights team. Obviously, I mean, most would probably say I do actually think it's more likely that Vasilevsky is going to win it, but I would say Fleury probably should be the guy that actually wins it, in my opinion.
No, totally valid. I think Fleury has been very underrated on a really good Vegas team. So let's move to the Norris Trophy. This one's a little bit more of a discussion. I think we've got a few legitimate candidates. To me, I feel like we have Victor Hedman to talk about, and I think he's kind of entering the realm where, in most years, Victor Hedman is the best defenseman in the world. Whether or not he wins the Norris Trophy is another discussion. So I think he's kind of in that discussion as being the undisputed best defenseman in the world. But the one guy who has really emerged as a guy who could kind of sneak in and win that Norris is Adam Fox, the New York Rangers. Obviously, the Rangers are very much on the outside looking into the playoffs right now, but Fox has just put up fantastic numbers, offensive numbers in the blue line, and a lot of his underlying numbers are just as good. He's not a strictly one-way defenseman. And we can talk about a couple other guys. John Carlson from the Capitals, once again, having another fantastic season. I know earlier in the year, some people were even floating out a guy like Drew Doughty. That's died down a little bit, I think. But Brandon, any thoughts on guys who you think deserving of winning the Norris Trophy?
Yeah, if I were going based off of recency bias, I would have to say Adam Fox because it seems like everywhere I turn, I see this kid's name, and it's not hard to see why. He's last time I checked, tied in points with Hedman, and he's even leapfrogged him a few times. They've been going back and forth on the season, and like you said, points aren't the only thing that matters. But from what I understand from the Rangers hockey that I watch, he's been a great two-way defenseman as well, and so just based on this guy kind of emerging and having a sort of breakout season for himself, I'd say my vote would go to Adam Fox just because I like, it's exciting when new defensemen make a case for themselves, especially when guys like Hedman can be so steadily great their entire careers. And really, like somebody like Hedman could win it every single season. But let's have Adam Fox win it. Let's get some new blood in there and show that there's some new great defensemen coming up in the league.
All right, guys, I'm throwing out a hot take here. Okay, I'm going to go full sizzle here. I don't know if you've seen this. Dom Luszczyszyn of The Athletic has talked about this. Jay Fresh Hockey, who was on our show, just recently started talking about this. I don't even think Victor Hedman should be nominated for the Norris Trophy this season. I think a lot of underlying stats actually paint him as a different hockey player. They still paint. I mean, we all know Victor Hedman's obviously one of the best defensemen in the NHL, but I think, he's kind of getting it based off his reputation and not because of his play this season. Adam Fox, even by baseline stats, has completely out contributed him this season, and underlying stats really suggest the same. Like, this guy was so underrated last season. I thought he should have been nominated for the Calder. Like, he was that good. And this kind of reminds me of, if he doesn't win, this will remind me of that season when Erik Karlsson had 82 points and literally did not win the Norris Trophy. That's what that reminds me of. I think it's quite clear here that Adam Fox should be winning the Norris Trophy, and I question whether even Victor Hedman should be nominated.
Yeah, it's definitely a discussion of whether or not the Norris Trophy is just a defenseman with the most points award. We're getting a little bit better at determining just how good defensemen are at both ends of the ice, but it's going to be an interesting discussion these last few games. So the last major award we'll get to is the Calder Trophy for Rookie of the Year, and this has really turned into a two-player race. Early in the year, it looked like Minnesota's Kirill Kaprizov was going to run away with this award, but Jason Robertson of the Dallas Stars has kind of closed the gap, and their numbers very similar. Kaprizov, as I'm looking at it right now, 41 points in 48 games. Robertson, 41 points in 47 games. So almost identical point totals. Kaprizov is obviously the flashier player. And I think the big discussion with this Calder Trophy, similar to the one we had a few years ago with Artemi Panarin, is Kaprizov really a rookie? You know, this is a guy who played several years professionally in Russia in the KHL and is not quite, you know, the deer in the headlights kind of guy we think of as first year NHL players. So I personally think it should still count. You know, we had this discussion with Panarin. We've had this with international players before. But Jordan, I'll start with you. Your thoughts on the Kaprizov versus Robertson debate for the Calder Trophy?
Well, all that nonsense about Kaprizov, to me, it's kind of just a joke, you know, like the rules dictate that this guy is eligible, so he's eligible. You know, if they change the rules, then he'll no longer be eligible. Why would you fault him for his play this season? The more interesting conversation should be of how Jason Robertson has emerged so much. Like, this is not a guy I ever thought was going to even put up numbers like this, if I'm being quite honest with you. I thought he was just going to, this is a player I touted as being a third line player, and he's completely stepped up for that Dallas Stars and been a huge key contributor for that. And, you know, I do think there's a chance here that he could win it. You know, I think he's pretty much solidified the second place vote, but I think because of Kaprizov's flashier play and just because of the hype coming into the season, most of the voters are going to pick Kaprizov for that reason. So I think it's still going to be Kirill, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would say it's going to be Kaprizov for sure. And for one reason, when I sat down and I thought about Kaprizov and Robertson pretty much scoring on the same pace, and I thought, okay, well, what were the expectations for each of their teams coming into the season? I don't think anybody had the Minnesota Wild being as good as they have been this season. And I think Kaprizov has totally ignited what has often looked like in recent years a totally stagnant offense, and he's made them exciting. And along with other young players like they have, you know, they have Victor Rask, who he's playing with. They have, you know, Jordan Greenway, a good power forward down there in Minnesota. So like they have a nice young core of forwards led by Kaprizov. And I think my vote goes to him just because he's made them an exciting team to watch, helped them clinch early. And that's something I did not expect from them. And while we're speaking of teams that have clinched the playoffs, there are 7 teams as we speak. So obviously by the time our listeners are listening to this, that might have changed a little bit. But as we speak, there are 7 teams clinching right now and obviously clinching scenarios in the next few days. So out of 16 slots, the 7 teams who have clinched, we have 3 in the Central. That is Carolina, Florida, and Tampa Bay. 3 out west with Vegas, Colorado, and Minnesota. Only team in the Great White North is Toronto. And the East Division, no teams have clinched yet, although it's looking pretty clear what the 4 teams are going to be. Take it away, Nick. What do you think of the teams that have clinched? Who's clinching next, and how is this going to stack up?
Yeah, so we started with the Central, and you know those 3 teams at the top: Carolina, Florida, Tampa, have kind of been interchangeable at 1, 2, 3. It looks like the Hurricanes are kind of in the driver's seat for that 1 seed, and the battle for the 4 seed has kind of turned into Dallas and Nashville. And we just talked about Jason Robertson helping out the Stars. I think as they get a little healthier, Tyler Seguin's going to be coming back. I think the Stars are going to be a dangerous team, and I think they will eventually pull out that 4th seed in the Central. And I mentioned this, I believe, on last week's show. I just want to see any of those top 3 teams play each other, whether it's Carolina, Florida, and Tampa. I feel bad for Florida with no Aaron Ekblad. I think that's going to be a big disadvantage for them once the playoffs get started. But you know, the Central, I don't know what the expectations were for this division coming in, but they've got 3 of the best teams in the league coming into the season, and no real surprise considering their play that those top 3 have clinched spots.
Yeah, totally. I mean, looking at the Central, I believe the first 3 teams to even clinch a playoff spot all came from the Central in that order: Carolina, Tampa, and Florida. So it just shows you how amazing they are. I do think a guy we actually didn't touch upon enough was UC Saros in that Vezina conversation, guys, because the only reason the Nashville Predators are as good as they currently are is because of Saros' play this season. You know, this is a team we all thought should have sold at the trade deadline. You know, they would have been better off doing so, but they really believe that they can go far, I guess. So they're going to go to the first round and get swept by Carolina, I guess. I guess that's what they want to do. But I do think it's still going to be Nashville just because of how hot they've been recently. Like, it's difficult, though, to say that Dallas doesn't make the playoffs at all. But
yeah,
I have a weird feeling it's going to be the Nashville Predators that stay where they currently are.
Yeah, a little story for you. I drafted UC Saros in my fantasy league, and then for about the first half of the season, the Predators were looking like a very bad team, and so I dropped UC Saros, and then we all know what happened from there. So worst decision of my season on that front. Let's talk about the West Division, guys. The other team with three teams that have clinched, the Golden Knights, Avalanche, and Wild, out of the St. Louis Blues and Arizona Coyotes. Who makes it? Let's go to Nick.
Yeah, we were discussing this last time around. I think we all kind of had different answers. But these past few games, I think the Blues have really started to solidify that 4 seed. And we talked about early in the season, a lot of people thought it would be Vegas, Colorado, and St. Louis as the shoe-ins. Minnesota and St. Louis kind of swap those spots. But it looks more and more like the Blues are going to wrap that up. And I think that's them playing reasonably well, but the Coyotes really kind of fallen off. And not too surprising. I think I had the Blues coming in and getting that 4 seed. But similar to the Central, you've got three really strong teams at the top. And, unfortunately, St. Louis, even being a recent Stanley Cup champion, I think could serve as a bit of cannon fodder in that first round matchup, whether it's Vegas or Colorado, who gets the number 1 seed.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, Vegas, Colorado, Minnesota, that's no easy group to play either. Like, it's going to be interesting there because, Vegas is pretty much solidified first place there, so they're going to have an easy matchup for the 4th spot. But Colorado, Minnesota first round, yeesh, that's going to be exciting to watch. A team we keep underrating, by the way, is the San Jose Sharks, who currently are 1 game behind the Arizona Coyotes. And with Alex Barabanov in the lineup, he's inserted onto that second line actually with Tomas Hertl and Evander Kane. That line's been that's been their best line basically. He's got 2 assists in 2 games since joining the Sharks, and they're starting to win games here. Like I don't think they're necessarily out of the question. I do wonder if they should be doing this. Like, I think they're going to fall like literally 3 points out of a playoff spot. I probably shouldn't have picked the Los Angeles Kings looking back on it, but you never know. They just called up Quinton Byfield. Anything can happen, right? But it's most likely going to stay exactly how it is, I imagine. And I still think Colorado is going to pull ahead of Minnesota for second there. And I say the St. Louis Blues are the next team to clinch a spot in that division.
All right. So as we touch on the last 2 divisions here, North, Toronto's the only team that has clinched, and the East Division, no teams have clinched. Any notes on those 2 divisions and who we think is going to make it? Let's go to Nick.
Yeah, in the North, Toronto obviously has locked that up. Edmonton giving him a little bit of a run for the 1 seed, but I think Toronto is pretty comfortable at that 1 seed, and Edmonton looking more and more comfortable as the 2 seed. We kind of talked up Vancouver, their slim chances, and that seems like it's not going to happen. It does seem like we have a pretty solidified top 4 in the North, in Toronto, Edmonton, Winnipeg, and Montreal in that order. So I think those will be some interesting matchups. I know everyone's going to want to tune in for that Toronto Montreal series. I don't know how competitive that series is going to be, but with the Maple Leafs, you never know what's going to happen. And Edmonton, Winnipeg, obviously a lot of history there. Those teams haven't played each other in a long time, but that could be a very interesting matchup with the high flying Oilers going against one of the best goalies in the world in Connor Hellebuyck.
Yeah, I mean, the Montreal Canadiens they're acting like they don't even want a playoff spot at this point. They've been losing quite consistently as of late, and they're lucky that they lost all those games in overtime because they actually have the same amount of wins through 48 games played as the Calgary Flames, who are just 6 points behind them. But to be 6 points behind a team at this point in the regular season, with less than 10 games remaining, it's going to be tough, I think, for Calgary to really win, because the odds are they aren't going to win out the rest of the games here played. But Montreal, man, I think they're going to be the next team that clinches. Actually, Edmonton hasn't clinched yet first, so I'll retract my answer. But I think Edmonton's going to be pretty good here, guys. Connor McDavid's going to get to 100 points. The Oilers are going to win games down the stretch. It'll be them, then Winnipeg, then Montreal.
All right. Any last notes as we look to wrap up the show?
Yeah, we mentioned the East Division, and actually just kind of looking at the results tonight, both Washington and Pittsburgh did clinch spots. So they currently, I'm looking at the standings right now, tied at the top of the East, both with 69 points. But we kind of know who the top 4 are going to be: the Washington, Pittsburgh, the Islanders, and Boston Bruins. The Rangers have actually been playing pretty well recently and have a very strong point goal differential, I should say. But the math just isn't in their favor. The Bruins have looks like 2 games in hand on them. So those are the four teams it's looking like in the East, but the playoff matchups themselves are still very much up in the air. So I think it'll be interesting to see how those go. I think those matchups, we've seen a lot of those in recent years, whether it's Capitals, Penguins, or Bruins, Penguins, Islanders, Penguins, anything like that. Those matchups are always fun to watch come playoff time.
Yeah, it's officially looking like Taylor Hall is not a curse to any franchise he plays on. It looks like he's actually going to get to play in the playoffs for the second year in a row. First time that's going to happen for that player. And the Boston Bruins, they could even sneak in the third here. Like, they're not even technically out of the question for first place. That's why this is going to be an interesting finish to the season. I do think at some point we're going to get a Washington-Pittsburgh series, whether that's in the first round remains to be seen. But I'm interested here to see if the Boston Bruins leapfrog the Islanders. I'm going to say that the next team to clinch, I think the Islanders are going to fall into that fourth spot, and we're going to get a rematch of last year's first round between the Islanders and the Washington Capitals.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a fun rest of the season, and can't wait to see what happens with the playoffs. So I think that'll just about do it. So we thank you for joining us. This has been Sabres Scoop presented by the Hockey Writers. Make sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube, follow and share the show on Facebook, and follow the show on Twitter at Sabres Scoop THW. Don't miss out on all the great hockey content at thehockeywriters.com. For Brandon and Jordan, this is Nick, and this has been Sabres Scoop. Until next time.